All right, can we get started, please? Can you let me know when we're live?
We are live.
Thank you very much. I call to order the Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting on Monday, December 2nd, 2024. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday and got some rest and some love and quality time with family and friends. So can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councilor Romero Worth,
Present.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Present.
Councilor Castro,
Presente.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
Here.
Chair Chavez.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Next is going to be approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes from staff.
Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See none, motion passes. Next is approval of the consent agenda. The item that we do have pulled off of consent is item O in order to introduce an amendment. Is there anything else that needs to be pulled that maybe was not communicated? All right, can I have a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Director Wheeler, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia, Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Castro,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Next is public comment. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to come up to the podium and speak this evening? All right, I don't see anybody. We will move on to presentations. We have Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan Update. Who is going to be presenting to us this evening?
Madam Chair, that is Mr. John Rearing from Carollo Engineers.
And is he going to be online?
That's
All right,
correct.
so technology, if you could give us a hand in getting John promoted, please.
I think we're there. Thank you.
We hear you, but we don't see you. Oh, there you are. Hello, John. Welcome.
Good evening.
All right, John, so you are going to be sharing the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility Master Plan, a presentation for us. So I turn it over to you, okay?
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this evening. And John, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to start us off with in terms of remarks. If not, I'll start with the presentation.
Maybe just a reminder that we wanted to provide an update regarding the conclusions of the master plan, even prior to its finalization, given the impact of the two options that we had intended to compare. One being rehab, the other being reconstruction with options of a modular build out to make it affordable for us. So this is prior to the plan being finalized, but knowing what is in the final product as a whole. So there is some time where we might have things changed, but minimally, just to refine any missing pieces or any comments. So feel free to, whatever questions you have, if we can incorporate it, some answer or some concern that we haven't done well yet, we'll add it in. And also, we just wanted to reiterate that we're bringing it to you as fast as we can, so that you have it even prior to the final draft.
Okay. So with that introduction, and of course, as I think you're all familiar with, there's been a lot of discussion about the facility over the last couple of years. A lot of areas where it needs some improvements, and we're going to walk through those with some prioritized recommendations. And we're going to compare those also to what it might look like if we were to shift gears and instead look at a new water reclamation facility. And so with that, I'm going to talk about three main things here tonight. One is to review the phased CIP, that's a capital improvement plan for the Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility. Secondly, we'll compare that to the concept of a new water reclamation facility that would be sited adjacent nearby. And then third, give you kind of a snapshot of the preliminary recommendations from the master plan in terms of a path forward. I'm going to start though with the kind of the punchline, the key takeaways from this that are going to be reinforced with the remainder of the slides that I've got for you this evening. The first off is that we're making a recommendation that the plant should be re-rated to a capacity of 7 million gallons per day of flow and the associated flow influent loadings as well. And the reason for that is because it's going to be a long time before we hit the current rated capacity of 13 million gallons per day, or MGD. And by having that higher rated capacity in the permit, then it kind of forces you to build capacity that we know is not going to be used. And so the next time the permit gets renewed at the plant, which is scheduled for August of 2026, we're recommending that it get re-rated, essentially down-rated to 7 million gallons per day of capacity. Secondly, I want to make real clear that we have defined a very clear path for how we can meet current and anticipated future discharge permit limits at the Paseo Real plant under future flow and load conditions. There definitely is a path to do that. It's going to take some money, but so are the other alternatives as well. And we'll walk through what that path looks like. Third takeaway is that the cost to construct a new water reclamation facility we anticipate would be significantly higher than rehabilitating and making the improvements to the Paseo Real plant, but it will facilitate some benefits that are pretty hard to quantify in terms of monetizing those benefits. And so there's some considerations that we need to think through there when we're weighing these two kind of different forks in the road. Fourth, breaking recommendation in the master plan that some of the facilities stay put at the Paseo Real site no matter what happens. Those include the solids management. As you may know, there's been some recently rebuilt or newly added digester facilities. And there's other solids management facilities that we think would make sense to keep them where they are, whether there is or is not a new plant. Similarly, there's under design is the San Juan Chama return pump station and pipeline. We're recommending that that also stay on site at Paseo Real with or without a new plant. And then fifth item here is that we recommend initiating a series of capital projects at Paseo Real and continuing then on a parallel path to assess the merits of a new plant. And we refer to these as no regrets capital projects because we think they're ones that are necessary to get yourselves back in reliable compliance with your discharge permit at the plant. Even if we're going to build a new plant, it's going to take a while before that new plant could be fully online. And so kind of for the interim, in order to maintain compliance in the interim, there are some kind of prioritized or no regrets projects that we think are necessary either way. Okay, so let's move into looking at improvements at Paseo Real. Say there was a new plant. It's kind of the baseline scenario for comparison, and take a look at what that would entail. This picture here is an aerial view of the current facilities with the different process areas labeled. That red outline that you see, that's the airport lease area that is causing us to need to pay an annual fee to them. We don't really have control over that. We don't have much certainty over what that might look like in the future. So that's cause for concern. And as you can see, almost all of the facilities lie within those boundaries. Now, if we start taking a look at the capital improvement projects, you can see the colors here relate to different timeframes. Yellow is the near term, the first couple of years, and then the different colors out through the 20-year planning period. And you can see we're touching almost all major areas of the plant with improvements over time. You also might see, though, that there's a lot of yellow on this aerial view. And the reason for that is because there are a number of improvements that we think are necessary in the near term, again, to get the plant in reliable compliance with its discharge permit. If we look at that in terms of financial dollars, we've got the numbers throughout the master plan are presented both in today's dollars, so 2024 dollars, and also escalated to the year that we anticipate they would be spent for design and construction. So with the numbers I'm showing you here are all in escalated dollars and in escalated millions of dollars. So in those same buckets of timelines you see now through 20 years from now out to 2045, a lot of money in the upfront portion here, $135 million in escalated dollars in 2025 to 2027. And that's including a lot of projects that, again, we think are fairly urgent for rehabilitating the plant. These include improvements to the headworks. There's already been preliminary design started on that. A third aeration basin for reliability and redundancy reasons, so you can take one out of service and still maintain compliance. New filters. There's been a lot of challenges with the filtration performance. The existing technology is outdated and underperforming, and so that would address that and help with the disinfection and the compliance with the E. coli permit limits. Third, anaerobic digester to marry up with the two that were recently built there. UV disinfection improvements, that's already underway. It's been fully or getting close to full design on those improvements. Again, that's for the pathogen compliance with the E. coli limits in the discharge permit, and then a range of electrical and instrumentation or SCADA improvements as well. If we zoom through the next few time periods, we anticipate at some point the facility is going to get more stringent limits for nitrogen and phosphorus. And so at that point, we would convert those new filters over to denitrifying filters to get to those much lower nitrogen and phosphorus limits that we anticipate. Also some solids thickening and dewatering improvements. Really, it's just for aging equipment and newer technologies, more efficient technologies, and additional electrical and instrumentation improvements. Looking at a little bit further, we really don't know at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty of what's going to happen with regulation of PFAS in wastewater facilities in particular. You may have heard of those in the media as the so-called forever chemicals. They really are kind of omnipresent in our environment, and a lot of uncertainty, as I mentioned, about what's going to be required of wastewater treatment facilities. A lot of work going on kind of from the advocacy at the national level to make sure that wastewater facilities are not kind of holding the bag when it comes to paying the cost of those, rather push those costs to those who are generating or have generated the PFAS in our environment. But nonetheless, we think it's possible that facilities like yours might need to implement some kind of PFAS removal as part of their discharge permits in the future. So timing's highly uncertain, and the limits and requirements are also highly uncertain. But we've got a placeholder in there for granular activated carbon, or GAC, out there in the 2032 to 2036 range. That's a placeholder for, what if we did have some removal requirements. And that would remain the same whether it was at a new plant or the Paseo Real plant. That same kind of thing would be necessary. And lastly, you can see out in the longer term, we've got headworks renewal costs in there because if you replace a lot of that equipment in the near term, by the time we get out there, it'll be time to replace that. It'll have reached the end of its service life. So summarizing that financially, the capital improvement plan for the no new plant scenario, so kind of the baseline where we're just kind of doubling down on the Paseo Real plant. You can see that the nominal costs in 2024 dollars tally up to $214 million. If we escalate that adds up to $258 million in the years that it would be actually incurred or spent. But you also see there's a range over there. You can see up at the top, it says AACE Class 5. That's kind of the engineering standard for cost estimating. And Class 5 is the lowest class in terms of accuracy or kind of certainty in that cost estimating. And at this point, because we don't have any of the design details developed, we're really at the concept stage or the 0% design development. There's a really wide range on that. It can go anywhere from half the cost to double the cost. So we expect it would fall somewhere between 107 and 428 million. That is a really wide range, but the natural progression is as we develop more design definition on the different improvements, then we narrow in on that because then there's less uncertainty in terms of the requirements for what's going to be included in the design and ultimately in the construction. So hold on to that number for a moment, $207 million if we're just going to rehabilitate the plant. Switching gears now, taking a look at what a concept for a new water reclamation facility would look like. A few things just kind of in terms of background. We've assumed that it would be sited near the Paseo Real plant, essentially just across the Santa Fe River from the plant on some available land over there. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are recommending that solids management, so that's the digesters, thickeners, gas cleaning, composting, all of that would remain at the Paseo Real site. Some of that's within the airport lease boundary area, some of it's outside of it. We do think you'd be able to shrink down that airport lease area if we were to move forward with this. Also, the San Juan Chama return and reuse pump station and the pipeline that comes from it would also remain at Paseo Real. And we would construct, as John alluded to at the beginning here, we would construct this in phases. This is assumed right now that we've planned it out in terms of 2 million gallon per day increments. So 2 million gallons per day capacity for starters, then expand it to 4, then expand it to 6. And that would last you several decades in terms of capacity. But doing that in phases is really for cash flow reasons. And as a result, if that's how that would need to go for cash flow reasons, then you would be operating 2 plants until the new plant was fully built out and you could fully decommission Paseo Real. And for those reasons, then there are some improvements. That's the no regrets projects that I talked about at Paseo Real. Okay, so we have done some preliminary site layout in terms of the footprint for the facility. You can see in the figure at the right where the Paseo Real plant is over here in the lower right portion of the diagram. You've got the floodplain along the Santa Fe River shaded here in blue. And then we've got the new facilities going kind of from upstream to downstream, going from top to bottom of the figure here. And you can also see that we've got the facilities kind of laid out with these potential 2 MGD increments. So the lighter box like this one I'm highlighting now is the initial 2 MGD capacity, expanding then out eastward over time, ultimately out to as high as 8 MGD. But we anticipate that 8 MGD wouldn't be needed until sometime after the year 2100. And so this is very conceptual, but it starts to give a feel for what the facility would look like, what the layout would look like, what kind of the operations flow and traffic flow would look like on the site. There are a number of different things that will affect project costs as we get further into design. So the topography, trying to take advantage of gravity flow through here, but also the topography and trying to balance the excavation needs. So we're minimizing excavation. Those are all things that we refine in design, but will affect project costs. Staying out of the floodplain, of course, is a necessary thing to do. And so that affects the siting and the cost of the facilities. And then the last one highlighted here is flow transfer back and forth between the facilities. That'll of course be necessary during the period when we've got 2 plants operating. And then long-term, once the new plant had the full capacity and we're able to decommission the liquids train over at Paseo Real, then we would have some pumping needs continuing on to take the solids over to the Paseo Real site for processing there, and also taking the final effluent over to the San Juan Chama pump station, which is located about here on the figure. Okay, so with that background, here are the facilities then that would stay on Paseo Real. So the red ones are within that red boundary of the existing airport lease area. That's mainly the digester facilities, but then also the reuse pump station and tank. Some facilities would stay outside of that lease area, and those are shaded in orange here. So like the composting, dewatering that goes before the composting, and some of the filtrate equalization before it's returned back over to the liquids train. That could all stay on site, and that part would stay outside of the lease area. But we do think that we could shave down this lease area so that it's a significantly smaller footprint than what you have today. Now, taking a look back at that same bar chart I showed you, so the black numbers you've already seen, the blue bars are now comparing the new facility to the old one. This is improvements at the Paseo Real. In other words, things that would still need to happen at Paseo Real if a new plant is built, but if it's phased in over time. And so you can see the changes here, the headworks improvements here would still be necessary, but we could scale that back. So it'd be necessary basically to get by until the new plant was at its full capacity. We would not recommend doing the 3rd aeration basin or the new filters, but instead we would essentially try and limp along with the existing facilities until that new plant could be fully built out. And so that comes with some risk of continuing to potentially not be in compliance at certain times with a discharge permit, because we already know that the existing filters aren't really up to the task, but we're trying to save money. So those are things that we could potentially not do if we knew a new plant was on its way. We'd still do the third anaerobic digester because those solids facilities would stay at Paseo Real. We still would do the UV disinfection improvements at Paseo Real because that is an imminent, urgent need for and very clear need for permit compliance. That was the subject of the administrative action from NMED earlier this year. And similarly, there's some urgent priority electrical and instrumentation improvements as well. Looking ahead to the second package of projects, really there's a question mark about the timing of when the denitrifying filters would be necessary. In other words, when those new nitrogen and phosphorus limits might come into effect in your discharge permit. And so that's a question mark in terms of the timing of that permit and when those new limits would come into play relative to the timing of when the new plant could be built out. So there's the potential to eliminate those filters if that timing all works out. Solids improvements would still stay because, again, those are staying on site at Paseo Real. And we would have a reduced set of electrical and SCADA improvements in that second set of years. In the third set of years here, you can see the PFAS removal. Again, that's a placeholder, kind of assumed timing and assumed need to do that we really don't know about yet, but it's placeholder so we're ready if we do need to do that. You see that didn't change, and that's because those requirements are going to be necessary regardless of whether we got a new plant or we continue to work on the Paseo Real plant. That doesn't change that need at all. And then lastly, you can see that we wouldn't do the headworks renewal at Paseo Real in the long term if we knew new plant was coming in, because the new plant certainly would be online with full capacity by then. So back to this chart, you've seen the numbers on the left half here under the light blue banner. On the right half, you can see, so these are the Paseo Real costs if there's going to be a new plant, and if that new plant is going to be phased in over time. And so there's still a lot of money to be spent at Paseo Real, even if we know that new plant's coming. And so it reduces it, but it doesn't get rid of those costs altogether. So what then does that all add up to? If we're going to do a new plant, and we're going to forge ahead with that, the new plant cost itself, we've got a fairly detailed cost estimate for the level of design definition that we've got. We've seen a lot of escalation in construction costs, certainly post-COVID. The industry's really seen dramatic escalation of costs, unprecedented, unlike any of us have seen in our careers. We've estimated the cost of a new 2 MGD phase one of the plant at $248 million in 2024 dollars. That would be escalated higher to the year of construction. And then that initial 2 MGD phase would be essentially repeated as we build out the next 2 MGD and the third 2 MGD, but not as significant of cost as that initial 248, because we do have the ability to build out kind of expandability into that first 2 MGD. And so when you add it all up over here, first 2 MGD phase one would be $248 million, plus that $125 million of interim improvements at Paseo Real while the new plant is being built out so that we can be in permit compliance reliably with the discharge to the Santa Fe River and the new one out to the Rio Grande. And then as we expand the new water reclamation facility out to 6 MGD, that'll be another $230 million or so to get us from 2 MGD out to 4 and again out to 6. And so when you add all of that up, it adds up to around $600 million if we're going to move forward with the new plant option in order to get us there with that phased approach. Okay, so where does that lead us to in terms of preliminary recommendations? The path forward could consist of a few things. First off, we would recommend initiating no regrets priority capital improvements at Paseo Real. We estimate those at about $61 million, and that's really focused on near-term permit compliance, regardless of whether there's going to be a new plant or not. If we could build that new plant and have it online tomorrow, you could spend $0 at Paseo Real. That's not reality. It's going to take time. And during that time, we need to be able to be in compliance at the Paseo Real plant. And so these no regrets projects are ones that you would implement at Paseo Real, regardless of whether there is or is not going to be a new plant. And it gives you some time then to make good decisions about that. So on a parallel path, we'd recommend continuing to assess the potential benefits associated with the new plant. We'd also recommend doing a thorough condition assessment of structural and electrical assets at Paseo Real. That was not part of the master plan. We know that there are some improvements that'll be necessary there, but we haven't quantified those or characterized those yet. And then in parallel with all of those activities, assess community support for and the ability to obtain some funding or financing opportunities or strategies for the new plant. And all of that then would feed into an informed go, no-go decision on the new plant. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. Are there any questions from committee? Councilor Romero-Worth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my initial questions, besides the price tag, are around capacity. And so you're recommending reducing our capacity in that the permit allows from 13 MGD to 7 MGD. And that would happen, I think you said next year, August 2026? No, not next year, in 2 years.
August 2026 is correct. Councilor
Okay.
Romero.
And then are we then never going to be back at 13? We're building out, if we build a new one, we're building to just that level 7 MGD?
Yeah, Councilor Romero-Worth, it's a good question. The flow projections that have come out of a lot of the city's water planning efforts, which is they're related when we look at reuse through the San Juan Chama return project, that reusable and returnable water that shows up at the wastewater plant. And we got to know how much that is, right? So a lot of those flow projections came from the water division. And when they project those out, we wouldn't hit 7 MGD of flow at the plant until about the year 2100. And it's currently rated for 13 MGD. And so the problem is when the plant is rated for 13 MGD and that's in your permit, you need to build capacity for 13 MGD to comply with your permit. But we know that that capacity is going to sit there unused. And so it really doesn't make sense to build that, right? To spend the money on that. When we do that, we also need to think, though, about the loadings that come in. So that's the pounds per day of all the different constituents that come in with the wastewater. Those do track with population, whereas the flows are going to be affected by the degree to which conservation efforts continue to be effective in the community. And so we look at both of those, and we've got both of those projected out in our projections. But the way the permit is written, it's about flow capacity. But we also are mindful at the same time of the loading that it needs to be able to treat and address.
Okay, so you're saying that according to all the projections, we won't hit 7 MGD until 2100.
Yeah, like 2095, something like that.
Do you have any idea why our permit is at 13 MGD now? Did we just really miss the bullseye on that?
I think it probably was a combination of maybe some optimistic kind of flow projections, or trying to be conservative, right? We don't want to underestimate that and underbuild. Maybe went a little bit too far. I think it's also a reflection of just how successful the community's water conservation efforts really have been. It's really remarkable. And I think, they didn't have that benefit of looking at the success, looking backwards at the time that we do today.
Okay, and then 2 other things, and then I know my colleagues probably have more questions and we can come back. One of the things, the anaerobic digester has been a really important improvement out there, and You didn't say anything about, the energy generation. Have you all looked at that and when that might come online and how that is phased or part of whatever we do?
Yeah, Councilor Romerworth, we did not look at the energy generation as part of the master plan here. It is an important part of the solids processing overall. The third digester really is there more for, or would be added, again, regardless of a new plan. It would be there for reliability and redundancy. Right now, we're already kind of pushing against the capacity of the two that are there working together. And so if any maintenance needs to be done, we really don't have the ability to take one offline. And so adding the third digester would give that ability. And it's going to work again, kind of hand in hand with that energy generation. Just a matter of being able to take one of the digesters offline. So
Right,
you'll
but
always have two in operation.
Right, and I appreciate that. I just think that one of the upsides of all of this is the energy generation and the efficient, sorry, this mic is bad. The efficiency of the efficiency of our energy use out there seems like, something to tout and as a positive in some of this. So I guess I would be curious to know and have that be part of what you're talking about.
It absolutely is an important benefit and an important resource that we can recover at the plant. It's essentially unchanged by anything we're talking about here. So those facilities are in place, and all we're really doing is giving the city the ability then to take one of the digesters down and keep operating two of them that are needed for capacity. Those two, whichever two it is, would continue to work with that energy recovery facility. So it really doesn't change that.
Okay. And then just my last question is, you're just looking at the facility and what it needs and what it'll cost. You're not looking at the how do we pay for it part, are you?
No, the master plan has not assessed different strategies for that. That is one of the important follow-ups is to figure out kind of the best way to do that. I know that Mr. Dupuy has initiated some work to look at outside funding, as well as there's been some preliminary work by your consultant who looks at your rates for wastewater and what it would take if we were to increase revenue through rates.
Okay, and I guess then my question is directed at Director Dupuy in terms of, are you going to be doing a side-by-side plan of how we fund this, and is that when will we have? I know we've had different pieces of it, but just as this picture becomes more clear about what's required and what the cost is likely to be, are you kind of sharpening your focus on how we kind of match up the different funding sources that will actually get us to the goals that have been described here?
Madam Chair, Councilor Merritt, we have looked at that with our rate setting consultant, Jason Mumm from FCS. And in our prior presentation,
You've got a bat. Steal the thing from the other. You can.
so the result was what we presented previously, where the needed increase in the rates due to inflation was 4%. And that was through the projected period. We've analyzed what it would take to do the first 5 years, which is the initial improvements at the wastewater plant, plus the first module of the new facility. And that would require a one-time 18% increase instead of a 4 with the continued 4. We'll come back to you with a presentation with the details related to that and a dollar amount, because the 18% sounds high, but it's actually only a few dollars per customer per month. So we looked at that as a potential reasonable alternative. Alternatively, we can reduce that with any subsidies. So we've worked with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to add a benefit to reduce our amount that needs to be repaid with any loan forgiveness that they are able to provide to us. And also any future needs for capacity from partners' contributions related to that capacity would help subsidize the expense related to that specific set of projected increased needs.
Okay, I think, I'm sure we're all concerned about this and we'll want to know
It'll
more
be
about that. And
forthcoming.
it's one of those things that I think I have kept saying, we're going to have to pull from a lot of different places. We can't do this all on the rates and the rate structure. I mean, but we know that the rate structure probably needs tweaking, it's outdated. And then, yeah, some of these other places are going to be really important as well. So I'll yield the floor so other folks can ask questions. Thank you.
Counselor, I just also wanted to point out before I forget the number. I don't know if we could get this presentation uploaded because the numbers on the bar graphs are different in our packet than they are on the presentation. So what the public can see right now actually shows lower amounts than what was just. Okay, Sir Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Dupuy, what is the current capacity? Are we utilizing 7 millions per gallon or 7 million gallons per use per day?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we're approximately using 5 MGD on average per day.
Okay. In regards to this gigantic price tag that we just got hit with, what's the next steps? What's our plan? Or is the plan going to be proposed? How are we going to be moving forward? Because I know that was part of the master plan that's going to be presented sometime soon, I propose, but this is, as we've all said, this is something we've got to begin to respond to immediately. And so what are the next steps for us?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I think it's a 3-part approach. The first being the no regrets improvements. Those have to stay moving forward. They are necessary for the plant to continue compliance in the realm of time that is necessary for the plant to continue operation with either path forward. The second is having some community involvement in making this decision, because there are benefits, as Mr. Rearing alluded to, that are more about the priorities of the community related to what is the cheapest way to achieve compliance. It's like, where do we want to go in the future? Do we want to prepare for the needs of the future by building public trust and having facilities that use the best technology, and we get practice with our staff implementing those over time, and it builds public trust and then the ability to readily and reliably meet compliance standards? Or do we continue on something that is the bare minimum and just barely above it? The range of options are all legal, you know, and some communities are not blessed as much as ours. And we work very diligently in collaboration and subsidies to minimize the cost to the ratepayers. And that puts us in a position that allows for the range of options. We wouldn't propose anything that wasn't feasible. And ultimately, this is the range of feasible. So that would be option or step number 2. And then step number 3 in the immediate is to get it's a lower number, but a higher level cost estimate, where it has more effort put into understanding the actual cost with some design elements, some actual quotes from manufacturers, interacting with those building facilities today and not just looking at prior projects in the past, half decade to decade, where we've had incredible price ambiguity and volatility. And so those components are all ones that, today, all I really would ever rely on is a bid. because we just went through a period where pricing is incredibly unpredictable. And it's really hard, even with our consultants, doing a class 5 cost estimate, they're hesitant to even give a cost estimate. So getting something that gets us closer to a number that's more effort put into the actual number then gives us something that we can start to have some trust in that number being accurate. And so these numbers are high. My explanation to the governing body is that, look, this is the method that is part of the industry. Given the history we've had, it results in some high variability, and we always are on the conservative side. All that being the case, I wouldn't set my mind on any particular path until I have a better cost estimate. And so we've initiated that process already, so that's step number 3. Then we can come back with the response from the public, the more accurate cost estimate, and hopefully a plant that is in compliance consistently, because we've done those no regrets improvements, and say, here's your range of options, here's the impact to rates, here's what the public has said regarding their willingness to pay more for a particular end result, and it's your decision. And giving you that full range of options and not under duress, where we're in a situation right now under emergency projects and an administrative order. It's really hard not to just say 100% support. To me, the most meaningful decision comes from a place where you're not in that situation. And so I see in the next 6 months to a year, us being in that position where you can make that decision with all of that information.
Gotcha. And so part 1 of that plan is to begin the no regrets improvements, which over 2025 to 2027 comes at the initial estimated cost at $135 million. Am I understanding that correct, that we begin to implement that process?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I have it at 61, and I would refer to Mr. Rearing to double check either one of us. I think there's 2 paths. If you go the path of reconstruction, then it's the 61, because you can avoid some of the 135. And to me, leaving both paths open means not doing the difference between the 61 and the 135.
But if we go that's a kind of a short-term cost, right? I mean, because
That's
when
within the
you're-
next year. That's
Right.
correct.
because then you look at Grand Project, if you go down that path where it's 60 million, you're looking at a total project cost of 600 million, roughly what's estimated, right?
And that's within a 10-year period.
Correct. Yeah, so I think that's, if we can get, I mean, and I don't know if it's part of the strategic plan and I know it's laid out here, but if we can get that roadmap, okay, this is what it's gonna, year 1, boom. By year 5, this estimate, because I think I look at the sticker shock of 600 million, but unfortunately, that is the disappointing situation we're in with that treatment plant, is that I believe we cannot leave disintegrating treatment plant for future generations. Let's get them set up properly. And if it comes at that price tag, that's where it's our responsibility then to figure out where we get the money from. But I think that's where helping the public understand, if we're going to go down this more cost-effective route, these are the potential outcomes. If we go down this more higher cost but better investment in future infrastructure, this is what it's, and I hope that's going to be laid out in the strategic plan. If not, maybe there's got to be something that is easily, and I'm going to pun it up, easily digestible for folks, because it's important that the public is fully invested, not only standing behind it, but investing it with taxpayer resources. So, last question is when is the strategic plan going to become public?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I defer to Mr. Rearing. We recently had a target date to provide comments on the final draft. We are negotiating a MOA, I believe it's an MOA, not an MOU, with the Santa Fe County, so that the partnership for us working together is cemented in place prior to finalization. So we've put a slight delay in, but at a very meaningful outcome of including our neighbors and our partners for future projects in the process. And we've been working with them all along, but we think it's strategic to make sure the MOA is in place before we finalize the master plan. That way they have their say officially in what the master plan final product is. So I anticipate there's a slight delay of a month. And I think we were looking at the end of December, so maybe the end of January. If I'm wrong in your understanding, Mr. Rearing, please say.
No, Mr. Dupuy, that sounds about right to me.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the collaboration going on with the county because they are a critical partner in this. Thank you, Director Dupuy. No other questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Castro.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to my colleagues for a lot of good questions. I think that this is a great discussion. If I'm understanding correctly, we might want a little bit more detail, and that's a little bit difficult to give right now. But I think that what we have in front of us, once we get the updated slides, is going to be really useful. One of my favorite topics, I'm really interested to know, and this might be offline, how we are dealing with some of those water conservation efforts. And if we are looking to maybe do another permit or get a permit with less capacity because we didn't anticipate we were going to be using water as efficiently. I think one of my major concerns is with the two different projects. How difficult is it going to be, and how much pressure are we going to put on some of our infrastructure to use both sides of the river? This might actually be a Director Dozier question. Is there some concerns with splitting up staff and splitting up our resources on both sides of that river, in particular, with like moving vehicles across that river?
Councilor Castro. Trying to think through what issues could come up. The newer facility would be a lot more automated. So it would probably take on a lot less of a task of actually having people actually having to be there doing anything other than monitoring and repairing or resetting whatever the issue is. So I don't see that would be very much of an issue running two plants with the staff now. The hardest part, I think, would be trying to just have the consistency between the two plants. Trying to make both of them actually run what you want to run through them. I mean, it would be the biggest issue in the whole situation would be how we get the sludge and all of the, sewer system to feed to each one and feed it correctly at the right rates. I think that'd be the hardest part that we would have.
So what would that transition look like? Having to run our current plant, doing the updates, and then simultaneously building a second plant?
More than likely in the long run of to start the plant up and get it running, we would probably try to have some sort of contractor team that would run it and start it up and get it running and run it for a certain amount of time while our staff was learning how to run the system.
Madam Chair, Councilor Castro, what Mr. Dozier said is very common and very meaningful. They even have procurement methods that are anticipated called design, build, operate. And that generally lasts between 6 months and 3 years, depending on what your transition period is intended to be. We're initiating an aggressive education pipeline to build the workforce. That's something that we have to do, whichever path we take. And ultimately, we have an analogy in our current system, like in our water system. We currently operate the Canyon Road Water Treatment Facility. That facility has many distributed components. So it has wells that they oversee, it has booster stations, it has tanks, and and it's highly automated with everything able to be seen from a single control panel at the facility. And anytime that the operator, whether it's 1 or 2 at night, which it varies, the preference is 2, but more often, more recently, it's been 1, which is able to be handled meaningfully well when they have the ability to call out to staff to address anything remote or anything of substance at the facility. So let's say a major component goes down, they shut the facility down, they ask for support, support comes in, they have that support, and they bring the facility back up if it was necessary to take it down. Alternatively, if it's a remote site, and even if it's a trivial but potentially significant result, over time, they'll have a crew go out and, they're on call, they get paid extra. We provision for this. It's just part of the regular process. And I'd imagine it'd be something rather similar where the facility across the river, if that's where it ends up being, results in us having call-out staff provision for that purpose if necessary.
I guess my final question is, do either of you have a preference for either of the plans?
I mean, it'd be hard not to say no to a new facility.
My understanding is we have so much deferred maintenance at this original facility. That is why the price tag is as high as it is.
Some of the issues also have to do with the unknowns would be the big problem, because we can build a beautiful treatment unit on top of the ground and connect it up, but we don't know how a lot of the infrastructure underground is even, there's not much way other than potholing the ground, digging it up and looking at it to verify whether it's good or not.
Thank you so much. I'm sure I will be emailing you both many questions, but I appreciate your time.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the really great questions. I mean, I won't go through, I think a lot of the questions I had were addressed. And I'm kind of taking a look at this in terms of, what is going to be the best for us. Obviously, I do appreciate the notion that we need, there's no regrets investment that we have to do. It's always go back to an old car. How much do you invest into it until you have to replace it? What's the replacement value? And there's 2 things that really come to mind, because I think Councilor Romero Worth looks at the price tag, and I think everybody here is like, wow, this is going to be a lot. 600 million, 10 years at 60 million a year. Where do we get this money? 258 million divided, and they still use the same time frame, 10 years, 26 million per year. And there's 2 things that actually come to my mind when I'm thinking about that, is the functionality and the reliability. And for both models, how long into the future is that gonna be sustained? And so obviously, we all want to drive a new car. But the reality is sometimes we have to invest in what we have. A couple of things that I've heard quite a few times is that current plant that we have is not at full capacity, and just with the initial 13 million GPD, we want to go down to 7. I mean, the projections seem like it's going to be pretty far out, that we're not going to need that much capacity, especially in the way that we're conserving water and doing a lot of things through through our efforts, our conservation efforts. And so, all of these things just start coming into mind. And so I would really love to, if you know that, just even a projection, what is, the functionality? We obviously know that for our current plant. And so, reliability into the future and for how long, I think those are a couple of things, which again, are estimates. We don't know, things can break. But it seems to me that the current people that are there helping us to get this thing back online are saying it's a good plan. And so, there are unknowns, I think, without being able to go underneath the ground and see what that infrastructure looks like. Yeah, it's just a huge spread in cost to me, and it would really be important to kind of figure out how, yeah. And on the flip side, I mean, we invest 2.5 million or 2.6 mil, and then we have to do a new plan anyways in 10 or 15 years. It's a tough one, but I do see the cost, and I know this is something that ends up probably at finance committee, but from my perspective, functionality and reliability, and for how long, that's really the two biggest things that kind of reach out. And so I don't know if that was kind of looked at somewhat in this, or would that be under your next steps as far as to look into that, Director?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. I might want a little clarification, reliability and functionality for what goal? And before you answer, I'll just give you my perspective. And it's that the entire industry waits for the environment department, whether it's EPA or NMED, to put out the next requirement. And then they use anti-degradation concept, which says that you have to constantly improve and you can never regress. And then they'll look at what you have and then not push you to do too much beyond what you can afford. And they really don't push the issue of afford. And often I think what's affordable is what's important to you. And to me, it's like finding out what's important to our community. And for me, I see wastewater and water connected, where they're just one. Like 60 years to 100 years from now, we'll be in the frame of reference with climate change and dwindling supply available to the community of New Mexico, such that if we position ourselves well, instead of fighting for the next piece of water supply, we're partnering to enable more water supply available to others because we did our homework. And so that may not be where the future lands, like maybe something changes and we reverse climate change. But we still need a provision for a range, right? And that to me is like a core part of understanding how to give you the right answer, is knowing reliability to achieve what? Is it just the minimum that the regulatory agencies continue to impose? Or is it beyond that to provision us for future capabilities that put us in the best position possible to be a thriving community?
Well, I appreciate your trying to get the clarification, because I mean, the whole issue of water is it kind of very dependent on where you reside. And like here, we're in the high desert. I mean, look at what our water sources are.
Mhm.
You go to the Midwest or you go elsewhere and there's abundance of water everywhere. You go, I mean, I use this comparison. Last year around this time, I was in Japan and there's water everywhere. Nobody's conserving any water, but they're utilizing their infrastructures, their engineering, their expertise to take water, clean it, put it out to everyone. And so for us, it's different because we see our water resources as being limited, and we do see our climate change in this area. You go elsewhere, you know, in areas where there's access to water, and let's just say it's ocean water, or they figured out how to desalinate ocean water, an abundance of water. For our perspective, I think those are the two very tricky questions, is that we have how much is going to be available 20 or 30 or 40 years from now? And from our perspective of an environment, you know, how responsible are we going to be when we're cleaning it, putting it back into the ecosystem? And so that goes back to whichever model we choose to do, whatever the cost is. I mean, if the 600 million price tag is going to be sustainable 100 years from now or 200 years from now, then I think that's the smart choice. How do we fund it? Well, again, that's a whole nother conversation. But if we can achieve the same goal with spending $2.58 million, functionality wise, and it's going to be reliable into the, you know, the future, which will all be non-existent anymore, but, you know, there will be people here. Then I think that, you know, we make the wise choice. So I think we could spend another couple of hours asking all of these questions. But the bottom line is you go back to taking a look at what the capacity is of our current situation. How much do we invest in that? Or do we just say, hey, you know what, I think it's going to be worth to invest in the higher price tag? What eventually allows us to get all the best benefits of everything, I guess. I mean, you obviously want all of the, we want to drive the new car. Eventually that new car becomes an old car, and you're going to have to do something with that again. And so what is the best bang? And you can probably do it in sort of a curve or a projection. And I think that some of the models that Mr. Rearing put out there, it shows costs. And then, but going back to how long is it going to be reliable? And so, you know, if let's just say the remodel of our current plant is going to be, you know, we can say it's going to be good for 20 or 30 years, and the new plant's going to be 100 years. Well, then I'd say we go with the new one. But those are all things that we have to kind of, you know, hash out here. So we're not going to do that in this amount of time frame. So those are my concerns. Those are my questions. And with that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so my question is, which I think is to me, it's important, is we're talking a lot about the structure and the maintenance that we're having to do with the facility as it is from where we can see, right? Has there been records accurately maintained and systems in place so we have an idea of how the rest of the structure looks? Because I feel like that may have been another system that was broken throughout the years, which has made it very difficult, which makes me feel uneasy about not going the new facility route, because then we can not only create an infrastructure, but we can also create systems where we are maintaining and documenting and tracking that maintenance so that we can better plan. Where now we're not planning, we're just responding as things, you know, fall apart.
Madam Chair, it's very insightful thought, because it's something that Mr. Dozier and I had to face recently, which was, you know, we're very humble. We reach out to as many people as we can, and we try and make sure we're making the right decisions. And it's such a wide varying range of concerns, and dealing with the fires, which you never want to be in a firefight. Resulted in us reaching out to one of our consultants, I think he's vice president at HDR, just having him come over, look over things that we're doing. And he's like, you know, you have this asset management component of the emergency project that you're doing to make sure that you have an accurate assessment, of all the expenses forthcoming with the existing facility, including the very detailed pieces, not just the larger components, which is like the master plan level looks at. So right on target, same mindset when we created the emergency project is like long-term to make sure we're doing everything right. You need that piece. And he's like, well, you have an asset management plan that was completed in 2016, and there was even software implemented to assist you with utilizing, a system going forward. And it caught both of us off guard because neither one of us had really understood or known that. And I was like, can you give me a copy? And lo and behold, like we dug a little bit deeper. There was some software that was implemented. It was used. The 2016 plan wasn't recognized by anyone as the 2016 plan. They knew it as a software product that didn't work incredibly well. It wasn't implemented in a way that was like meaningful and successful. And it was ultimately given up on. But it still was a good base to start from to not redo work. And so we took advantage of that. We went back to Hazen, who's helping us with the emergency project, and said, hey, you gave us a cost estimate related to having to do all of this work from ground zero. We have up to this point, 2016 to now, there's been some changes. We can fill in the gaps, but now we got something to start with, and it's faster. Like, help us take advantage of that, and they did. So I have the same concern you have, which is the more we peel back, the more it feels like an onion with endless layers. And ultimately, I have to fight regularly to help encourage staff there that it is okay to fix things and that you don't have to find a workaround. And I don't know where that culture came from, but it's going to take a while to get beyond it. And we have to start treating the existing facility like the new facility. Otherwise, if I just give the keys over to the new facility, we'll treat it like the old facility. And so, even though it's a little difficult dealing with the concept, spending money in the old facility, it's necessary. And specifically the way we're going about spending some of the money, not just spending money needlessly, it's to practice treating it like a new facility.
Yeah. So in treating it like a new facility, and because I don't know, I am far from the expert in what y'all do. So what I want to know though, because data is important to me just in my field, what systems are we using right now when we are having to do this maintenance? Like, how is it being tracked when we fix something and we have like a faulty whatever it might be, and we're having to invest unexpected money? Like, how is that all being tracked? Because I think that our community is going to have a lot of concern with that part. Like, yes, maybe the new facility is the best option, but what within the facility in regards to systems, policies, procedures are also being addressed so that we don't end up in a similar situation. So no matter who's in charge, no matter who comes in, from leadership to those on the ground, like they could step in and continue kind of where the last individuals left off. Because I think there was a big hiccup there, but I might be wrong. Maybe there are systems, maybe there is appropriate tracking that I'm not aware of, but what does that look like right now?
Madam Chair, the systems that you talk about are something that were practiced within other areas of public utilities department, specifically water. So literally, whether my staff like it or not, trying to steal water staff and encourage them to go to the wastewater facility by helping them to not have to take a pay cut to do that. And there are many that are dual certified, and we want to start incentivizing that as well. So certification-based pay. So we've been working with HR to implement all of that. That will help bring over those great practices from water. And a lot of it's just reporting. Having your data organized and then having someone that expects to hear about it and then holding yourself accountable to report on it.
So we don't utilize any software for that? Because the reporting kind of scares me.
We have regulatory reporting that we keep up with very meaningfully. And we have a software product called Op10. It's like operations, and it's like version 10 of the software. That's helpful in logging all the data that then gets exported to create reports. So we do have a system, but it's nowhere near asset management, and it's nowhere near asset performance management.
Is that because of the software or because it's inconsistently used?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So even when the software was used, and I went back and talked to people that were around then and said, "Hey, did we ever use this thing?" And they were like, "Yeah," and it worked for a little while. And like someone was really religious about it, then someone left.
Yeah.
And that's to me where the obligation to report out becomes important, because even when you have transition, even the new guy that doesn't know anything about it gets a call from our public, our council, our managers, or the city manager, any level in the chain, and says, "Where's that report? We expect it every year." Then they have to dig, go use that information and produce the reporting. And then it gets them in the mindset of holding themselves accountable as a system.
I think, in saying what I feel is best, I feel like a new facility is a better investment. But I am a strong believer that that's only the case if I'm confident with how internally it's gonna operate. And I feel like that's what's missing here. And that might just come from the leaders that are there. And I don't know how the community will feel, but it's like when we're gonna put a large investment in making sure something runs smoothly, it won't matter if there's not systems in place to ensure that that's gonna take place. And I feel like there might be some inconsistencies that would be great for you all to get to a place where you can confidently say have been addressed, whether it's trainings taking place. We saw, I think Emily Oster did a really good job in addressing some of those hiccups in finance where, we started narrowing down on monthly reports and just the reporting increased. So people just had the practice and the consistency of these are the systems that will take place for us to manage our assets and making sure that, we are taking care of what our city and our taxpayers invested into. I think that's a big missing component. I also think that I believe that the community is going to come with wanting some reassurance around that as well. And I think that approach and presenting to the community is going to be more positive, is like, being very clear on the two different paths, but also just building confidence in the leadership we have. And we have great leadership. You both have been very innovative, communicative, just transparent, which the community wants. But I think that we're going to have to bring some of what you all bring to this facility in this presentation in order for us to get an accurate voice of our community. Like we have to address the internal workings and how we're gonna fix those. And even down to like recruitment and how we're gonna retain employees. And I know you said that you're building like an education pathway or certification pathway. Like we need to include some of these things because the city is gonna be very hesitant on investing if we're leaving it in hands of individuals that they're not 100% confident in. They're never gonna be 100%. But the more we can discuss the improvements we're making and us really thinking about every possible thing that might have negative impact on this investment, then they're going to have more trust in the decision we make. It's just a comment, and thank you for responding very honestly. And I trust that you guys will bring information that and put systems in place that will address a lot of those inconsistencies. So thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. And just a reminder to switch to the presentations just so we have accurate numbers for the public, okay? All right, thank you so much, John. You have a good evening, okay? Appreciate your time.
Sure will. Thank you very much. Great.
All right, I think we are moving on to consent, and it is the item that I pulled and my computer turned off. If I didn't have Counselor Castro here, I wouldn't be able to ever navigate. So we're pulling item O, and I'm going to read it. Let me get there. Got it. It's me a while, but I'll get there. So O is a resolution number 2024, a resolution assigning authorized officers and agents for grant agreement number SAP 22G419 STB for the plan, design, and construction of improvements on Hemes Road. And we have Director Wheeler here, but really we pulled this item off because we wanted to introduce an amendment. The amendment really is just to clarify the role of our, I'm gonna pull up their name here, of our fiscal agent. So if you look at the amendment within the resolution, it just more clearly defines North Central Economic Development District and their fiscal agent services. It names Facility Fonseca and exactly what her role will be, which would be to sign requests for payment submitted by the city to the state pursuant to Article 9 of the agreement and attachment. So that is what we wanted to do, is just more clearly define the fiscal agent's role and who the fiscal agent is. And Ms. Wheeler, did I leave anything out on that?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I would just add that this is a resolution is required by the New Mexico Environment Department in order to receive this 2022 appropriation. So that's it, and you'll see we'll actually have about 11 more resolutions that are pretty similar to this coming through that are required by DOT and NMED to get our appropriation agreements. But you're exactly right about the purpose of the amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there questions on the amendment?
Are you moving it?
I'm moving it.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councilor Castro,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, can we get a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Castro,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. Next, we are matters from staff. So we'll go back to you, Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have anything from staff except for that I did submit a request to get us some foam covers back on the microphones. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. I think we've been I think we've been like stealing them from each other. So thank you. Director Dupuy?
Are told not to steal them.
Some red ones for Christmas time.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Nothing additional beyond something that's already gone out for public consumption, which is the increased releases from the reservoirs. We're doing construction. We want to make sure we have room in McClure for the snowpack forthcoming. We want to release slowly so there's no impacts while we're releasing. So we started those releases early.
Great, thank you. Are there matters from the committee today? No matters. So from me, I do want to wish everyone a happy holiday because we're not going to see anyone until the new year. And well, we will see each other a few times this month, but Public Works and Utilities will not be held until January 6th, 2025. So we'll be in the new year. So I hope you all find some time to rest and enjoy the holidays. Don't work too hard. I think everyone in this room works very hard. So try to find some you time. And we will see you in the new year. We are adjourned. Thank you.